I was 21 years old. I was a pinup model. I was working with a photographer, and he said that Universal, or UI as it was called then, are looking for somebody to pose in a film. So I called and made an appointment. I went and spoke with Mr. Hitchcock and basically had to strip down, got dressed again, and then was interviewed by Janet Leigh, and I had to strip down for her too. Well, just in my underpants, but anyway, my body was very similar to hers, so I got hired. I had to report for makeup, I don't know, 1 or 2 days later, and there's the red light flashing and no admittance and all of this. And I thought, oh God, you know, here they're expecting a stripper. I was not quite completely nude. I had what we called a crotch patch. During filming with the shower going and everything, it would come loose. I told Hitchcock, I said, why don't we take this thing off? And he says, no. The whole time he wore a suit, black tie, white shirt. I was hired for 2 or 3 days and wound up working for 7.
It's extraordinary that it took so long to do that one particular scene, because that was about a third of what Janet Leigh had to work for the movie.
There were 78 pieces of film in about 45 seconds.
Spending 7 days on one small set, shooting, you know, such a short scene was pretty much unheard of.
Generally these days, you're lucky if you get 1 day to kill someone.
It has to be an obsession. You know, shooting that over the course of 7 days, that is absolutely an obsession.
Hitchcock thought to film this murder separately from the rest of the movie, which meant, in a way, that murder was now going to be an acceptable part of entertainment. There was violence in American films, but nothing like Psycho. Nothing that intimate, nothing that designed, nothing that kind of remorseless.
I think he knew what he had on his hands, and he probably felt like the whole film hinged on that moment. That's this crucible moment.
You should have seen the blood. The whole place was, well, it's too horrible to describe. Dreadful.
It's, I think, the first modern expression of the female body under assault. And in some ways, it's its most pure expression because it is devastating.
Women had top billing in the 30s and 20s. And that sort of evaporated during the 40s. And by the time we got to the end of the 50s, women were, secondary in movies. And Hitch sort of, that's what the movie does in a way, say that. He's killing off the woman.
And it was really the first A movie to deal with this kind of horror, trashy, tabloid stuff.
Nobody wanted to make it, and they went, are you nuts? You just did North by Northwest, this incredible hit. Now you want to do this, like, black and white. What is this thing?
I have just made a motion picture, North by Northwest.
North by Northwest was like the ultimate achievement, and on every level. It was grand entertainment. It was classy to movie stars. It was beautiful. It was colorful. So how are you going to follow that up with a prank?
I once made a movie, rather tongue-in-cheek, called Psycho. Yes, and it was a big joke, And I was horrified to find that some people took it seriously. It was intended to cause people to scream and yell and so forth, but no more than the screaming and yelling on the Switchback Railway.
Those of us who work in the horror genre rarely wear tuxedos. This is not a movie that wears a tuxedo either. This is a movie that's very much jeans and a t-shirt, but it's told by a guy who wears a tuxedo.
He wanted to stray beyond his comfort zone. One of the things he was up to is, you don't know me at all. And that's what Psycho is really about.
What attracted you to this one, then?
I think the murder in the bathtub, coming out of the blue, That was about all.
Hitchcock was very, very aware of his competition. He realized that Clouseau had done the kind of movie that he felt that he should and could be making. And of course, when critics started calling Clouseau the French Hitchcock, well, you were invading his territory then, and believe me, he took notice.
Psycho is really the moment where the gloves come off. It does feel like Hitch's revenge on Hollywood to some extent. In so many levels, it's his masterpiece.
I continue to feel like the movie is an act of aggression against his fans, his critics, actors. Yeah. It just feels angry, like he was hurt and he had to hurt back.
The sudden violence of the shower scene in Psycho was meaningful to him for reasons that dated back, 20 years to the origins of World War II. Hitchcock thought that the UK and the United States were insufficiently prepared for the dangers and horrors of World War II. There were several moments in his movies that spoke to that.
You can hear the bombs falling on the streets and the homes. Don't tune me out. Hang on a while. This is a big story, and you're part of it. It's too late to do anything here now except stand in the dark and let them come.
What's the matter with us? We not only let the Nazi do our rowing for us, but our thinking. Ye gods and little fishes.
One of them was Shadow of a Doubt, only about a year and a half after Pearl Harbor, set in Santa Rosa in California. You can see how in that movie, he's kind of chastising this town for being naive.
You live in a dream. You're a sleepwalker, blind. How do you know what the world is like? Do you know the world is a foul sty? Do you know if you ripped the fronts off houses, you'd find swine?
He was basically saying, America, you were way too naive. You think you're safe in your shower at home with, your family and loved ones nearby? No, you're not. Sorry.
Hitchcock had many obsessions, but one of them that he talked about with the birds was the randomness of life. There is no explanation for the birds attacking. To him, that was life. There you are, everything's fine, and then someone gets cancer and they're dead 2 weeks later. Or your life is good and then you get hit by a bus.
Hitchcock was someone who, for several years now, was showing up on people's TV sets on Sunday nights.
The victim tumbled and fell with a horrible crash. I think the back broke immediately and hit the floor. It's difficult to describe the way that
he was an icon. He was this sort of avuncular yet creepy guy who was presenting sex and violence to Americans leavened with black humor every Sunday night. And Americans were comfortable with him by 1960. If someone else had made Psycho, it's quite possible that the reaction would not have been the same.
Psycho came at a very unique time in American pop culture. It almost predates the turmoil and the shock and the trauma that were to come in the 1960s with racial violence, with political assassinations. I'm not saying that Hitchcock anticipated it and knew what he was up to, but what he did know is that he was trapped by his past, that it was not a time anymore for Grace Kelly. It was not a time anymore for what he called beautiful Technicolor baubles.
When you look at Psycho and you look at those magnificent, elegant, big, rich Technicolor films of the 50s, you know that something changed.
I think that Psycho was his response to movies changing and to upping the ante and not wanting to be forgotten.
1959 that was the year of Some Like It Hot, Suddenly Last Summer, and Anatomy of a Murder. All three of those movies pushed boundaries, so there was something in the air, culturally speaking, that Hollywood was already tapping into.
Psycho comes out at this period where we're post-atomic age, but pre-civil rights. You know, if you think about the horror movie violence, they were science gone wrong, but you didn't really feel like it was going to happen to you. Psycho you felt could happen to you. This was the first movie that showed, yeah, you can be vulnerable, naked, alone in a shower, and someone who is wearing the clothes of their dead mother is going to come in and just stab you, because that's what they're going to do.
Americans were kind of obsessed with domesticity. They wanted to tell themselves that in their private, personal, domestic spaces, at least there, they were safe. The Soviets and whomever else, they couldn't possibly get to you in your bathroom. A few days after Psycho begins shooting in November of 1959, the Clutter family in Kansas is murdered. Those are the in cold blood murders.
You're not living next door to the Norman Rockwell family anymore. You're living next door to the Manson family. This is the new modern American family, which is very much inspired Tobe Hooper's The Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
The first Playboy Club opens in Chicago. The most famous sitcom stars of the 1950s, Lucille Ball and Ricky Ricardo, are divorced. The birth control pill is approved by the FDA.
You could look at the shower scene as this buildup of tension of all of these things, all of these American fears of the quiet 50s. It's all going to explode, and it comes out in this scene.
Well, I was on the critics list in New York for reviewer. The press was all invited to the theater the day it opened at 10 or 10:30 in the morning for the first performance. As you went in, Hitchcock's voice was blaring on loudspeakers saying, "Nobody will be allowed in after the picture starts, and please don't reveal the ending."
Before Psycho, movies as a form of entertainment were relatively disposable.
There was a tremendous, compared to today, a tremendous coming and going in movie theaters. And Hitchcock brilliantly said, we don't want anyone coming in after the beginning of this film. It changed the way films are exhibited.
The reason was because the leading lady, Janet Leigh, was killed off a third of the way through. And I didn't want people whispering to each other, when is Janet Leigh coming on?
He wanted to build anticipation.
The bathroom.
Something terrible happens in a bathroom. We know this from the trailer. We don't know it's Janet Leigh because it's Vera Miles in the trailer and not Janet Leigh.
The minute the curtain opened and started stabbing, there was a sustained shriek from the audience. Ah! Like that. You couldn't hear anything of the soundtrack through the entire shower scene.
So you had the screams from Janet Leigh, the screams from all the women surrounding you in the theater, and the high shrieking strings from Herman. That must have been total mayhem.
It was actually the first time in the history of movies where it wasn't safe to be in the movie theater. And when I walked out into Times Square at noon, I felt I'd been raped.
In 1895, when the Lumiere brothers really first showed film to an audience, one of the fragments they showed was of a train pulling into a station.
And the legend has it, they thought the train was going to hit them, and they were screaming, and it was like caused a stampede of people trying to evacuate this room that it was screened in. But they didn't understand the concept. You know, Psycho comes along and has a similar kind of impact.
It's the only movie in my childhood that my mom wouldn't let me go and see, which was kind of ridiculous because I was seeing nothing but horror films every single weekend, 2 of them, in fact, but Psycho? No, I couldn't go.
As a kid, when I would hear about it, I thought the name was Psycho, like it was about some killer on a motorcycle. But I actually got this Super 8 version and just like constantly ran the movie over and over again.
When audiences saw this really likable character, someone who was quite relatable in terms of, I need more money, I'm growing older, the man that I love won't marry me, they were really hooked.
Oh, Sam, let's get married.
Yeah. And live with me in a storeroom behind a hardware store in Fairvale. We'll have lots of laughs.
Of course she's gonna survive the movie. It's Janet Leigh. Instead, she takes a shower. Out of nowhere, she's murdered by an old lady who I can't even see? What the fuck is going on here?
He has broken the covenant of filmmaker and audience, and the audience cannot wait to see more.
He was a respected director, and, you know, she was a bona fide movie star, and I think you kind of get into the thrill of that possible shockwave, which obviously happened.
I think that moment signaled new American cinema, maybe new world cinema in certain ways.
No, I don't know that had ever been done.
Right.
Or maybe there's some obscure Czechoslovakian film that did it, and there's a guy going like,
I did it first!
Yeah.
I can think of things that culturally have got us thinking about that structure. For instance, the first season of Game of Thrones, in which our most appealing character of Ned Stark is just sort of cruelly killed in front of us. Culturally, we had to be reminded of the power of that narrative trope.
The reality is he used the whole first half of the movie as a ruse to get you to this house. And the only way you're going to get to this house is if you believe that she's someone who's stolen $40,000 and that she's gotten off on the wrong freeway exit and is on this little tiny road where nobody goes by. There's a lot of things he's saying here about our society that was changing at that point. We were trying to get as fast as we could from Los Angeles to Chicago or New York, and going into these little towns was not necessary anymore. And Norman doesn't even seem to mind. He's ready to change the bed sheets every day with nobody there.
One by one, you drop the formalities. I shouldn't even bother changing the sheets, but old habits die hard.
When she's driving off with the $40,000, she's on the road and she's in the West. There's something fundamentally American about that, dating back all the way to Manifest Destiny. Go West. find your fate, find your freedom. Marion tries to do just that, and that's where she meets her fate.
It's interesting to compare the novel Psycho with the movie Psycho.
The shower scene is a lot different. It's really brief in the book. So on page 28, here's the shower scene.
The roar was deafening. The room was beginning to steam up. That's why she didn't hear the door open or note the sound of footsteps. And at first, when the shower curtains parted, the steam obscured the face. Then she did see it there. Just a face, peering through the curtains, hanging in midair like a mask. A half scarf concealed the hair and the glassy eyes stared inhumanly. But it wasn't a mask. It couldn't be. The skin had been powdered dead white, and 2 hectic spots of rouge centered on the cheekbones. It wasn't a mask. It was the face of a crazy woman. Mary started to scream, and then the curtain parted further, and a hand appeared holding a butcher knife. It was the knife that a moment later cut off her scream and her head.
The fact that Hitchcock brought Saul Bass in to work on the shower scene as its own kind of independent thing says to me that he knew that he had to do something special with the shower scene.
Interior, Marion shower. We see the bathroom door being pushed slowly open. The noise of the shower drowns out any sound. The door is then slowly and carefully closed, and we see the shadow of a woman fall across the shower curtain. Mary's back is turned to the curtain. The white brightness of the bathroom is almost blinding. Suddenly, we see the hand reach up, grasp the shower curtain, rip it aside. Cut to Mary, extreme close-up. As she turns in response to the feel and sound of the shower curtain being torn aside, a look of pure horror erupts in her face. A low, terrible groan begins to rise up out of her throat. A hand comes into shot. The hand holds an enormous bread knife. The flint of the blade shatters the screen to an almost total silver blankness. The slashing, an impression of a knife slashing, as if tearing at the very screen, ripping the film. Over it, the brief gulps of screaming. And then silence. And then the dreadful thump as Mary's body falls in the tub. Reverse angle, the blank whiteness, the blur of the shower water. The hand pulling the shower curtain back. We catch one flicker of a glimpse of the murderer. A woman, her face contorted with madness, her head wild with hair, as if she were wearing a fright wig. And then we see only the curtain, closed across the tub, and hear the rush of the shower water. Above the shower bar, we see the bathroom door open again, and after a moment, we hear the sound of the front door slamming. Cut to the dead body, lying half in, half out of the tub, the head tumbled over, touching the floor, the hair wet, one eye wide open as if popped, one arm lying limp and wet along the tile floor. Coming down the side of the tub, running thick and dark along the porcelain, we see many small threads of blood. Camera moves away from the body, travels slowly across the bathroom, past the toilet, out into the bedroom.
I think that the shower scene elevated film. Not the horror genre specifically, but filmmaking in general.
Over and over again, and it keeps showing you new things. I think it's one of those spectacular pieces of work.
The film is moving inexorably to that scene. You don't know it as a viewer.
Sam, this is the last time. I pay too. They also pay who meet in hotel rooms.
There are plenty of motels in this area. You should have, I mean, just to be safe.
Mother, my mother, what is the phrase? She isn't quite herself today.
Hitchcock was amazing at setting everything up. When she's packing to go to see her boyfriend. You see the shower head in the background.
And it's very specific. The shower is right over her shoulder.
You know, when it comes to Norman, when he talks about the bathroom, he like stutters and he can't really say toilet, you know, or bathroom.
And the, over there.
The bathroom.
Yeah.
That's what's great about Hitchcock. I mean, he always really like tunes into those character moments.
That desperate drive at the beginning, it's crazy good. The notion of getting clean, that's her arc. She can't see because of the density of the water, which is really beautiful because she's drowning in her worry and fear.
The slashing of the wipers presages the slashing of the knife. It's sort of, there's a very violent and wet and sloshy, sharp stabbing motion.
And it's a long build-up, but we have no idea that the rain that's going to come down upon her later is going to include her own blood.
I certainly get the sensation that the shower scene was something that Hitchcock had probably been working towards all of his life.
Is he cleaning house?
He's washing down the bathroom walls.
Must have splattered a lot. Well, why not? That's what we're all thinking. He killed her in there. He has to clean up those stains before he leaves.
Well, you really can't talk about the shower scene without talking about the rest of the film.
Without the parlor scene, obviously the shower scene doesn't really work nearly as well because the parlor scene is a sort of really sad, beautiful connection that comes before this savagery.
Is your time so empty?
No. Well, I run the office and tend the cabins and grounds and do little errands for my mother. The one she allows I might be capable of doing.
Do you go out with friends?
Well, a boy's best friend is his mother.
It has a very loaded preamble to the shower scene.
Wouldn't it be better if you put her someplace?
You mean an institution? A madhouse?
Look how still he is. Whereas before, he was fidgety and moving around. Suddenly he became very still.
Maybe that's the moment he decided to kill her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's super confident now.
Yeah. He's barely moving his head. Just his eyes.
Wow. Oh, he's so angry.
And she just got terrified.
Yeah. Oh, you're not going back to your room already?
Perhaps I'll go back to my room now. Norman, it's been lovely to chat. Terribly sorry about your loneliness.
Whoa. This is the first moment that you're with him, not her.
Yeah, she literally walks away from camera.
Yeah, right.
And then we're with him now.
My job here is done.
Yeah.
I'm no longer the protagonist of this story.
There was a private supper here. And, oh, by the way, this picture has great significance because let's go along to cabin number 1.
The painting that Mr. Bates removed to become the Peeping Tom was actually a 16th or early 17th century painting. Susanna and the Elders is actually a morality story about a virtuous woman who bathed in her garden and was spied on by 2 elder men. And the theme burgeoned, possibly as a result of counter-reformatory motives. It was either that or it was simply an excuse for painting female nudity. Now, the interesting thing about it is it's about adultery, and it's fascinating because Mary, who's in the shower, is kind of cleansing herself of committing adultery with a married man. In art history, there were about 3 or 4 different phases of how artists depicted Susanna and Elders. Lucas van Leyden shows the 2 elders in prominence, whereas the small Susanna is bathing in the far distance. But by the time you get to Tintoretto, she's full frontal. Rubens begins to take and probe the psychological intensity of the moment. Rembrandt's using the power of lightness and darkness, of highlights to enhance the drama. The interesting thing about the painting is that you've got full frontal nudity of Susanna, and yet the two elders are not simply looking at her, they're actually groping and violating her. It's almost a rape scene that's taking place before our eyes. It's an amazing painting that he picked. It's not any old Baroque painting. It's voyeurism. He removes the voyeuristic painting to become the voyeur looking in on the shower. He could have picked from 50 different examples, but he chose this one because it had the most amount of information that he could use for his film.